All right.
Hi, it's good to see you. Hi, I'm doing fine. It's a wonderful thing that work is finished. How are you doing?
I'm good. I just got back from work as well. I was interpreting, so I got home and I kind of took a breath, and now I'm ready for this interview.
Awesome. I'm happy to see you again. I'm happy to be here for the interview.
Yeah, no problem. So, how was your class today? Have you had any. Did anything interesting happen today with your class?
Yes, actually, something interesting did happen. So, today we've been doing, as we've been doing all along, the Zoom classes. So I teach deaf and hard of hearing students, and I noticed it was very difficult to get their attention on screen. I would wave at them, hey, look at me, trying to get their attention, and I just grew tired of it. So I decided to make a sign with each student's name on it so I could hold it up onto the screen and they could see. The students would, suddenly look at me and say, oh, that's a sign with my name on it. Are you calling on me? And I would smile and say yes and go on with whatever it was I was teaching. So, interestingly enough, this works. In the classroom, if we're there physically, I'm able to tap on their desk, touch them on the shoulder, and grab their attentions. But on the screen, it's hard to do that because their eyes are roaming all over the place. So I'm not even sure if they're looking at me directly, if they're looking at something that's going on in the house or in their environment, something in the room that's causing a distraction. Maybe the TV is on. Maybe there's a family member walking around. And so it's very distracting and challenging for me as a teacher here at home to not be able to be in the same environment with them.
So, you notice a challenge with your students being distracted? That seems like a typical response from them. I like that idea of putting a whiteboard on screen. Do you have another way to grab their attention, or another way to help your students with their fatigue with their eyes? How can you solve that?
I do give breaks throughout. I typically give 2 breaks. The first is the normal recess, quote unquote, break, where we turn our cameras off and I let the kids go do whatever it is that they want to do at home. And then we offer another break that I typically call the PE break, because we're sitting in front of our computers all day for instruction. And so we don't have a PE, a gym class established. Typically in the school week, we have an hour twice a week for PE. So I try to give them breaks every day, every so often. And we'll use that as a PE break. And it helps the kids, to wake up, to move around, to get blood flowing.
Get rid of their energy.
Exactly, because they're sitting there all day and, it can be kind of drowsy, and I see that they're lagging in energy. So I'll notice what's going on and I'll say, okay, guys, we've got 10 minutes, until break, let's go ahead and get this done. And then I'll offer the breaks. And so it helps.
Wow. So I'm curious, your classroom, what age range do you teach, and what's your class structure like?
So I teach middle school, so 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. I have a total of 8 students. 1 student is in mainstream class all day, so once in a while they'll come into the Zoom for support. And I also have an assistant, so I use the assistant for things such as the breakout rooms. We have different activities that are done there. Keep in mind that our students are at a variety of different levels. They're not all on the same grade level, reading level, math level, writing level. Everyone is different. And so we have to modify our teaching for that. Science we do together as a big group, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Cool.
So I'll give a project. I'll give them, hey, go ahead and make some slides on your computer. And they really enjoy working with partners. So that's a great opportunity. And it helps with their communication skills as well.
Right. How do you encourage your students to sign, even though some parents would rather teach their students speech and how there are different preferences? How do you enforce signing?
Well, the students already know what my hard and fast rule is. As a teacher who is deaf, the students who are also deaf, I encourage everyone to use ASL. They have to. I remember the first time that I taught middle school, I did at that time have some students who were more oral. And so I would encourage them to use their hands. You can use simultaneous communication, simcom, talking and signing at the same time. I mean, that's fair. It's just the importance of access for all. So all of my students are aware that we need to sign. Most of their parents at home don't use sign language. And so the kids know that, but they still know that this is my class and here we sign.
That's nice. Wow. What has inspired you to become a teacher?
It started when I was working at a camp with deaf kids. I noticed that I enjoyed my interactions with them. I enjoy communication, which is so key. I love conversing with those kids, and I just really enjoyed their presence. And so the importance of language to me was something that I felt that I could emphasize. And it can be challenging for some kids if they don't have that language access. And so I decided that I could be that. Some kids are growing up at home where they have limited conversation and communication because they are deaf. They are very language deprived, and that's a huge issue that we're discussing more and more today. These kids, as deaf kids, are experiencing language deprivation. So as I was teaching, I noticed kids' eyes would light up. They would understand, and that just was something that really touched me and inspired me to continue teaching. And as deaf kids, these kids are going to be our future. They're going to be the deaf leaders. They're going to be the ones in the deaf community. So this is my way to, give them the responsibility and encourage their growth and development.
That's great. How do you face their variety of skills in your class?
Well, fortunately, I have a fantastic aide. So that's key for me. The teamwork between the teacher and the aide is something that's necessary to be able to delegate things here and there to someone else to help them do different things while I'm focusing on teaching maybe one or two students who are perhaps at the same level. We're able to shift students around between the two of us, and we have a lot of group work.
Okay, so you emphasize group work. Okay. I'm curious, how has COVID-19 impacted your new teaching life?
Boy, oh boy, I'm still not used to this. Staying at home around the clock. My job has now become an office job, a desk job, where I'm focused on a screen. I'm working on a computer all day. My eyes are not used to that. They're really not as sharp as they used to be. And looking at this computer is not great. I prefer to be in class, physically walking around, touching things with my students, passing out papers. And here at home, I'm limited to what I can do mentally. I have to think ahead of time. I need to be doubly prepared. I need to make sure I have something for each student to fit their needs. For example, I have a list of activities that I have ready, and I notice that this might fit some students but not match the levels of other students. So I have to do rearranging and replanning, and all of that is on the computer, which is really tough. I set up everything in Google Classrooms, and I use that as my teaching platform. And I noticed some students have a lower level of reading ability. And so that causes another set of issues, not just technology, but how to navigate on the technology to do what you need to do. So that's very challenging, and it means that there's more work for me because now I have to show students where to go. I am able to use screen share, and I can point out different things to them, and it's seeing where their eyes are. What are you looking at? And so that I can help them out. So it kind of ends up being an extended process, and I have to be patient. In person, I can just say, oh, this right here, and I can point at something. I can help them, oh, look at this over here. Versus me being at home now and them being at home, I have to kind of figure out where their eyes are at so I can explain it to them, and that is a definite challenge.
But it's good for your students to practice that.
Oh, yeah.
That skill rather than looking around in class.
Right. Yeah. They have to, receptively pay attention, understand what is being said to them, be more in control of their eye gaze and what they're attending to.
I'm curious about parents' involvement. So you mentioned not all parents sign to their children. So how do you encourage these parents to be involved and help their students with their day-to-day life in school?
Really, it's tough because it depends on what the home situation is. For example, I do have some students whose parents do not speak English. And so that creates more of a challenge for me as well as for them. So they have to learn English as well as ASL, and their home language is neither. So it's more of a responsibility for me to focus on what I'm doing here and for them and to support the families as much as I can.
Sometimes it can be busy.
Oh, yeah, very busy. And it can be hard for me to encourage parental involvement. Hey, take sign language classes. In many years, I've kind of preached that to my parents as I've taught, hey, parent, mom, dad, take sign, please. Take a sign class. And most parents don't end up doing that.
Wow.
I've had a few, maybe one or two here or there, who do go ahead and they learn sign well enough to communicate with their kid. So there's that.
That's interesting. Language is so important. I don't understand how parents don't do it, but that's not my decision. To each their own.
Yeah, and I understand, sometimes they have, older kids. And so as a young kid versus an older kid, parents are able to kind of finesse and finagle their way with the younger kid. But once your kid grows up into a teen, how do you develop communication, are able to express emotions and, deal with things like that? It's pretty sad.
Do you notice that you find yourself having like a dual role, kind of like some type of counselor to your students? Because you're a role model and who's an adult who can sign, and so if the student isn't looking at their parent who doesn't sign, how do you feel about that?
Well, I do wear many different hats as part of my role. I am a teacher. I function as a mother because I am a mom. I'm chastising students. Hey, did you brush your teeth? What time did you go to bed? I am, asking them things like that. Did you shower? Did you change your clothes? You got to change your clothes. You can't wear the same clothes day in and day out. You have to change your clothes every day, kind of being that motherly role. Keep things clean. I am a counselor. I do listen when kids want to vent. I'm here for that purpose, to try to hash things out with them. So yes, I have many different hats, many different roles and responsibilities that are part and parcel of my job, but I do enjoy it. My job is very interesting. It's not stable. It's not the same old day in and day out. Different things crop up, and I have to be ready to meet those challenges as they come.
I like that answer. You have a great perspective. It's healthy.
And I try to have a positive perspective, keep things moving in a positive fashion, because the kids are looking at me and I have to show them, and am I going to show them something positive or negative? Am I going to show them frustration or patience? I'm able to influence who they are. And sometimes I have to put on a role and be positive and say everything's going to be fine. And then that influences the kids to think the same way. So hopefully that's something I can continue.
Yes, that is important. When your students have finished, graduated, and they're out in life, do they ever find the time to come back and visit you?
Yes, sometimes they do, or sometimes I'll bump into them around the way, and they're adults now and they've got adult lives, and I'm always happy to see them, of course. Some kids are able to look back and say, oh, do you remember when this happened in class? Remember when that happened? And we're able to reminisce and chat about it together. And it's always good to see students once they grow up.
Wow. And you impacted their lives too.
I hope so. I hope.
I'm sure you did. Your students, what are the barriers that they face?
Students face barriers, for example, in their language limitations and challenges. Most of them grow up and they're not able to establish fluency in sign language until later. They're not reading at their grade level, which causes more of a problem for them when they go out in the world and they experience things in the real world. Their reading skills, because they're behind, they're not able to communicate as clearly, as readily. And so when hearing people want to write things down to communicate, how can they write back if they're not able to read and understand? So yeah, that is a huge challenge that my students face. And that's all due to language deprivation. That's the cause of the problem. We're not teaching these kids early enough ASL and English at the same time in a bilingual approach. And if we were able to do that, they would develop both languages much more readily.
Wow, so does that mean you do prepare your students to speak with hearing people? Do you come up with situations?
Yeah, I do show them. Because at school, we do have hearing staff who don't sign. For example, our principal, some other staff members that might enter into the classroom, they have a pen and paper. And so the kids see me model how to communicate with hearing people via writing things down. So I'll show them very direct instruction. I'm writing back and forth with myself and the hearing staff member. They're able to see that. Also, I do take the kids out for walks. We might go to McDonald's, for example, and they have to communicate independently once they're old enough, of course. And so they're not going to rely on mom and dad forever. I tell them, you're going to do this yourself. This is middle school. It's about time you be independent. So they're very excited, but they're nervous at the same time. So I tend to go first, and so they can watch me write things down and hand in my order and go back and forth with the cashier. And the students realize how to do that. And now with the advent of cell phones, we're able to just type our order out already, have it on the phone, show the cashier, and move along. And so the kids realize, wow, I can do this. I can figure it out. There's another way other than using speech.
Right. Wow, that's a great approach. Do you experience your students... Do you experience distractions with your students either in class or virtually with their cell phones, trying to be sly?
Oh, yes, especially during virtual classrooms. I notice my kids on the phone, their eyes are slanted downward in their lap, and I'm like, hey, are you using your phone? And they jump up like, oh my gosh, how did you know? And I say, you know what? I have deaf eyes. I catch everything. I catch every single move you make. I notice your eyes are facing downward. That means you've got a phone in your lap trying to be sly. Stop it. This is school. Put your phone in your backpack. You know how we do in school normally? I control my kids in the classroom, and I see that they have phones and they're not allowed to have them. But at home, the phone is right there at their disposal. So I'll try to encourage them, put your phone away, put it down, put it away. But no, I need to use my phone for class. And I'm like, knock it off. Come on, put your phones down. So they try it, but they don't get away with it.
I love it. I completely understand. I used to be a student too, so hey.
Yeah, exactly. It's addicting. Those phones are pretty addicting as a teenager. You love your phones. Your phone is like you're glued. You glued your phone onto your hand, and everywhere your hand goes, your phone goes. I've got 2 sons. My teenage boys are the same way. They walk around all day, all the time with that phone right there at their disposal. And I'm like, come on. They go in the kitchen to get food with their phones in their hand, using one hand to hold the phone and the other to open up the cabinet to get snacks. So that phone is always there. It never leaves.
I'm guilty.
I mean, you can't survive without the thing, I guess.
Communication is important.
Yeah, I agree.
But really, friends are important.
I know, I agree. But they're always on that phone.
Yeah, you got to figure out what's happening. What's the hot gossip?
Yeah,
Just kidding.
Of course. You're wondering what's going on at the world because you're staying at home and you might be missing out on something that's going on.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
How do you think virtual learning will impact the classroom when it's over? How do you think your classroom will look like with this change?
Yeah, I'm sure the kids are going to have different feelings about coming back to school, whether it be nervousness or excitement or confusion of what's going on. Heading back to school, of course, will mean lots of chatter with the kids because being on screen is one thing, but being in person face to face and being able to talk with friends is something totally different. At home, they're isolated and they're only seeing each other on the screen, but once they're able to meet up again, the level of excitement is going to be off the pages. They're going to hug each other and talk and catch up. And I mean, it's going to be nonstop chatter. I can see it now. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen because that's how I feel too.
How do you think you will handle that in your classroom?
I'm just going to let it happen. Just go ahead and talk. I'll be right over here. I'll just sit back and watch and analyze what they're talking about and, pay attention as a professional, look at their facial expressions, see how their discourse is. And then when it's time to stop, we'll stop and start off with class.
That's nice. That's nice. I like how you'll approach that. What would you like parents of students to know? What is most important?
What's really important is signing with your child, communicating with your child. Your kids will enjoy that. If you're trying to learn sign for the purpose of communication, which is so key, it's so important. And it doesn't matter, if their speech skills are going downhill or not, because they'll have the benefit of 2 languages. ASL is just going to boost their understanding. It's going to boost their English. They'll learn words. They'll learn grammar and sentences. Go ahead and learn. Being bilingual is great.
Wow, what a big barrier.
It is, yeah. And still to this day, I still see it happening, unfortunately.
You've taught how many years in total?
Almost 20 years now.
20 years? Wow.
Yes. Wow. Hello. I can look back and see some of my students who I taught when they were young, they've graduated, they're now in college, and it's like, oh, wow. I've worked for this many years? Oh my gosh, it's crazy. Time really does fly.
Do you notice the attitudes of parents toward signing has changed over the last 20 years of your teaching, or has it been the same?
It's been the same. I've noticed it's been pretty much the same, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, for real, yeah. Parents tend to be really concerned about speech. They focus on the speech all the time. They ask me about adding more speech minutes, more hours on their IEP, and I'm like, okay, you're focusing just on voices and hearing ability. That's it. That's all you want to focus on? You need to have an open-mindedness towards signing.
Right. Why not? There's beautiful culture that they don't even know about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. That's sad.
I know.
One last question. How can we help support you?
Well, I would like for everyone to help by convincing these parents of these children who, these children are deaf, whether you have codas or interpreters, to look up to these individuals and see that they grew up to be just fine. There is nothing wrong with being a deaf adult.
You're more intelligent.
Exactly.
When you're young, you get that
look at
maturity.
Look at you. Look at you. You grew up just fine, didn't you?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I want to explain to parents. There's nothing at all wrong with using ASL. There is a benefit to using ASL.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No problem. And I enjoyed you having me.
Great. All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording.
Awesome. Great.